Mom gets blasted by Karen for her ugly baby. Then husband does this in an angry impulse. It was a bright sunny day, the kind of day that made Sarah feel hopeful and proud. After weeks of mostly staying inside with her newborn son, Evan, she was thrilled to finally enjoy a simple stroll with him, cradled safely in her arms. Today felt like a little victory. New motherhood had been challenging, no doubt, but she was finally finding her footing. Evan, bundled up in a soft yellow blanket, gazed around with wide, curious eyes, and every glance from him filled her with a quiet joy. As she walked down the bustling street, she noticed people smiling at her. It was a nice neighborhood, full of friendly faces, where passerbys often stopped to admire a baby or chat for a moment. Sarah felt a comforting sense of community, like her little family was part of something warm and welcoming. In the midst of it all, she caught sight of Tom, her husband, across the street, grabbing coffee at their favorite little shop. He waved and she gave a small smile, feeling a surge of love. It felt like a perfect moment. But then, just as she was enjoying the day, a woman she hadn't noticed before stepped closer, looking directly at her and Evan. The woman's expression was strange. Her mouth twisted into a slight grimace as she examined Sarah's son. Sarah felt a twinge of unease as the stranger lingered a bit too long, sizing them up with narrowed eyes. Sarah tried to brush it off, but the woman spoke, her voice cutting through the pleasant hum of the street. The woman's tone was condescending, almost amused, as she murmured something about how not even a baby is a looker. Sarah felt her cheeks burn. The words, though quiet, stung, each one dripping with disdain. She glanced down at Evan, as if reassuring her of his sweet little face. But the woman continued, louder this time, throwing in a laugh that made Sarah's heart sink. People around them began to turn, curious about the disturbance, and Sarah felt her stomach twist with embarrassment. Welcome back to PlotTwister. Before we unravel today's mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're always in the loop. Across the street, Tom looked up, noticing the woman's voice growing louder. His eyes met Sarah's, and he could see something wasn't right. The woman, now clearly intent on making her point, took another step closer to Sarah and Evan. Her eyes darted from Sarah's face back down to the baby with an expression that seemed almost smug. She raised an eyebrow as if she couldn't believe Sarah would bring this child out for everyone to see. Sarah felt her throat tighten, and her grip on Evan's little blanket grew firmer. She wished she could just turn and leave, but her feet felt glued to the pavement, locked in a mix of shock and hurt. As if her earlier comments weren't enough, the woman kept going, shaking her head as she muttered about how some people shouldn't flatter themselves about their unfortunate-looking kids. The words came out sharp, almost rehearsed, like she had thought of them beforehand, and couldn't wait to unleash them. The other pedestrians, who had mostly been moving past without a second glance, started to slow down, some even pausing, their eyes drawn to the unfolding scene. It was clear how that people were listening, watching, curious and confused. Sarah's face flushed with heat. She felt a mix of anger and humiliation, each word from the woman digging deeper into her already frazzled nerves. She glanced down at Evan, his tiny face calm and peaceful, blissfully unaware of the stranger's harsh words. But Sarah could feel her composure slipping, her hands trembling slightly, and she struggled to hold back the urge to respond. Deep down, she hoped the woman would just stop, maybe taking the hint from the crowd's disapproving stares, and go on her way. Yet the woman didn't stop. She went on, her voice louder and more grating, laughing as she commented on how Sarah must have rose-colored glasses on to think her baby was worth showing off. The crowd was murmuring now, a few people glancing at each other, clearly disturbed by the woman's blunt cruelty. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, the humiliation nearly overwhelming. Across the street, Tom had stopped in his tracks. He took in the scene, his jaw set, his eyes narrowing as he began to understand what was happening. Tom's eyes locked onto the scene, his heart pounding as he saw the stranger standing too close to Sarah, her face twisted into a mocking smile. He started to move, his coffee forgotten on a nearby table, as he made his way through the crowd, each step fueled by a growing sense of anger. Tom's focus zeroed in on Sarah's distressed expression and the stranger's smug face, her words spilling out carelessly, each one seeming crueler than the last. Reaching Sarah's side, Tom stood firmly, his presence immediately noticeable. He looked the woman squarely in the eyes, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. For a brief moment she paused, her smile faltering as she registered his stern gaze. But then, with a dismissive shrug, she rolled her eyes and let off a scoff, clearly unfazed by his sudden appearance. With a smirk, she muttered something under her breath about people being too sensitive these days. Her tone was almost mocking, as though she was daring him to react. Tom's hands clenched at his sides, the sharpness of her words testing every ounce of his patience. Sarah, seeing his expression, touched his arm gently, as if hoping to calm him down. But the gesture only made him more determined. He felt an intense wave of protectiveness, not only for Sarah, but for Evan, still blissfully unaware in his mother's arms. Ignoring the woman's challenging stare, Tom spoke calmly but firmly, his voice carrying a weight that made a few people in the crowd shift uneasily. He asked her why she thought it was acceptable to judge someone's child in such a cruel way, especially a baby. The woman laughed, rolling her eyes again, dismissing his question with a wave of her hand, as if he were being ridiculous. She muttered something about just being honest, and added that people need to toughen up. Tom's face tightened, the thin line of patience he held beginning to fray. The bystanders watched, their murmurs growing louder, sensing the tension. Sarah could feel the storm brewing inside him, and gripped Evan a little tighter, her own heart racing. Tom's eyes never left the woman, each second intensifying his resolve to respond in a way that would defend his family without sinking to her level. A small crowd had gathered, a mix of curious faces and concerned expressions, all drawn in by the unusual scene unfolding before them. People whispered to each other, their eyes darting between the woman's smug smile. Tom's clenched jaw and Sarah, who looked increasingly overwhelmed. Some in the crowd seemed sympathetic, their frowns directed toward the stranger, while others just looked on, captivated by the drama of it all. Sarah felt the weight of every stare, each glance only adding to her embarrassment. She wanted nothing more than to disappear, to slip out of sight with Evan and let the moment pass. Her cheeks burned and her eyes dropped to the ground, unable to meet the gaze of the onlookers. It was a strange, helpless feeling. She had no control, no way to protect her son from the stranger's sharp words, or from the eyes that lingered on them with a mix of pity and curiosity. The woman, seemingly enjoying the attention, smirked at the crowd's reaction. She tilted her head, making a grand show of her honest opinions, her voice carrying over the whispers. She laughed, adding a final jab about people these days being too soft and needing to learn to take a little honesty. Her tone was self-assured, dismissive, as though she were delivering some kind of public service announcement. Tom's face was tense, his eyes still fixed on the woman. He barely glanced at the crowd, focused solely on defending Sarah and Evan. But Sarah could feel every single set of eyes on her, and it made her feel exposed, like her small family had become an unwelcome spectacle. She hugged Evan closer, feeling a swell of frustration mixed with shame, her mind racing with thoughts, wishing she could go back to their peaceful walk, back to the warmth and innocence of just moments before. A few people in the crowd exchanged sympathetic looks with Sarah, small glances that conveyed quiet support, but even that didn't ease the knot of tension in her chest. She avoided their eyes, her face flushed, and for a brief moment she wondered if she could just turn and walk away. Yet Tom's steady presence beside her gave her the tiniest sense of comfort, even as her heart pounded and the crowd's whispered continued to echo around them. Tom took a slow, deep breath, his face calm but his eyes holding a quiet fire. Without a word, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. The woman, Karen, as some nearby voices murmured, watched him with a skeptical frown, her smirk fading slightly, uncertain of his next move. The crowd fell silent, sensing something unexpected was about to happen, their murmurs replaced by a heavy waiting tension. Tom didn't rush. He opened his wallet carefully, his hands steady, and pulled out a small bill. Holding it between his fingers, he looked at Karen with a steady gaze that was impossible to misinterpret. In the sudden quiet, his voice carried, calm yet piercing, as he held the bill out to her, saying that since she seemed so concerned with appearances, maybe this could help her improve hers. The words landed like a shockwave. Karen's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and anger flashing across her face. Her mouth opened slightly as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She was caught off guard, her usual snappy confidence faltering under Tom's calm, pointed response. She glanced down at the bill, her cheeks flushing, visibly rattled. The smugness that had been plastered on her face moments before was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable, forced smile. A few people in the crowd stifled chuckles, and the tension in the air shifted. Some onlookers even clapped lightly, their quiet support for Tom's response unmistakable. The whole street seemed to take a collective breath. The mood now changed as the crowd's sympathy turned firmly towards Sarah and Tom. The people who had been silent or unsure now shared knowing looks, nodding with approval at the unexpected turn. Karen's face reddened as she realized the attention was now on her in a way she hadn't planned for. She looked at the bill, her fingers twitching as she hesitated to take it. But Tom didn't pull it back, his calm, unwavering stance making it clear he wouldn't back down. After a few tense seconds, Karen scoffed, muttering something under her breath, and quickly stepped back, her face a mixture of shock and embarrassment as she turned and walked away, clutching her purse tightly. As Karen retreated, the crowd watched her go, their quiet murmurs laced with a sense of satisfaction. Tom turned back to Sarah, his face softening, his hand reaching for hers as the crowd slowly began to disperse. As Karen disappeared down the street, her retreating figure stiff with embarrassment, a collective sense of relief washed over the small crowd. The tension that had gripped everyone seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that justice, in some way, had been served. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment lift from her shoulders, her heart still racing, but no longer heavy with shame. Tom's hand found hers, warm and reassuring, grounding her back in the present. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude, and he responded with a gentle smile that told her everything was going to be okay. He glanced down at Evan, who had stayed peaceful and calm through it all, oblivious to the commotion. For a moment, Tom just looked at his son, a quiet pride in his eyes, and Sarah felt a deep surge of love for the man standing by her side. A few people from the crowd approached them, their faces soft with sympathy and understanding. One older woman, her eyes kind and her voice gentle, leaned in and told Sarah not to let anyone make her doubt her beautiful family. Others nodded, some offering words of comfort or a simple smile, their presence a silent support for what she had just endured. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her, the sting of Karen's words fading as she took in the kindness of strangers. Together she and Tom began to walk away from the spot where the confrontation had unfolded. The crowd slowly dispersed behind them, the street returning to its usual hum of activity. As they walked, Sarah felt a newfound sense of strength, an awareness that they could face anything as long as they were together. She glanced at Tom, her heart swelling with pride and appreciation for the way he had handled everything with dignity and love. By the time they reached the end of the block, Sarah felt lighter. The day seemed bright once more. She gave Evan a soft kiss on the forehead, grateful that he had no memory of the harsh words spoken. With Tom's arm around her, she knew that her family was safe, loved and resilient. The incident, though painful, had only strengthened the bond she shared with her husband and their precious son. As they continued on their way, she felt ready to leave the moment behind, walking forward with the people who mattered most. What are your thoughts on the twist we uncovered today? Comment your ideas below. Make sure to like and subscribe for a daily dose of drama and mystery. See you later with another twist.